report shows that Americans face the most severe impact to wages in 25 years. I don't think this is hyperbole. I think it's based in fact. A new report published by the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas states that American workers' wage growth is lagging behind inflation at a rate that we haven't seen in 25 years. This is a direct quote from the report that was published just 2 days ago. We find that a majority of employed workers' real wages have failed to keep up with the inflation in the past year. For these workers, the median decline in real wages is a little more than 8.5%. Taken together, these outcomes appear to be the most severe faced by employed workers over the past 25 years. Again, this is the Cleveland Fed Senior Advisor Robert Rich and former Dallas Fed Executive Vice President and Senior Advisor Joseph Tracy. They authored the report. Now, the analysis showed that in the last year, so our most recent year, 53.4% of workers saw their real wages decline. Okay, now again, real wages, so we're talking about their wages plus their costs, and so this is the real number. And in the past, the average has been 44% of workers see declines since the year beforehand when we've gone into inflationary periods. And so this is now driving what I touched on briefly in our first segment, that the inflation is driving more Americans to live paycheck to paycheck. Okay, so let's just paint more of a picture here. Okay, so in an effort to curb the inflation, the Federal Reserve obviously has announced multiple interest rate hikes based on what I see in the September job report. I'm telling you, I think you're going to see maybe 1-2 more substantive hikes this year because, again, Jerome Powell has gone on record multiple times as saying we're going to have to see some pain in the employment market, in the jobs area, in order to get inflation under control. I've also said that I think it's moronic. I think it's not common sense, and I think the Fed is overreacting. We're starting to see more economists line up and take this position. And I think it's misguided. The last thing we want to do is affect wages and salaries. The last thing we want to do is affect large layoffs. Why would we want to do that? Well, it's going to cause absolute panic and widespread problems. Okay. According to another measure released this week, the Economics Cost Index showed a 5.1% increase in wages for Americans over the past year. But Federal Reserve officials have noted that inflation driving up the cost of goods means that those larger earnings for American workers won't take them very far at the grocery store or the gas pump. And again, I mean, you want to get on Main Street on this stuff, this is where it hits people the hardest. The gas pump, groceries, costs of utilities, and again, multiple experts saying the cost of energy is going to go through the roof this winter as we start getting into the heating season and beyond. So a report released by the Lending Club found that 61% of Americans, and this is unbelievable. And listen, I'm not going to just paint a bunch of bad news here. I'm going to give you some ways to work through this if you're in this number. But we've got to confront this. 61% of Americans, that's roughly 157 million adults, are living paycheck to paycheck. That's an increase from last year, when in June 2021, the number was 58%. Now, this is where it gets mind-blowing. Of those earning $200,000 per year or more, 36% of people making $200,000 or more are reporting living paycheck to paycheck. Another report from Willis Towers Watson found that those earning $100,000 or more per year, that same number, 36%, reported living paycheck to paycheck. Lending Club also found that among all consumers, average savings dropped to $10,757 in June from the previous month in May when the savings was, this is average savings, $11,274. So what does that mean? People are now starting to dip into their savings for living expenses, And even more troubling, they're falling back on credit cards, which I saw something recently. I don't have the data right here in this article, that credit card debt was at an all-time high. So people are very vulnerable. Okay, so this is where we have to have an adult conversation. Wages in the form of hourly wages and salaries at an all-time high. We look at the September job report. We saw another 4+ million people leave their jobs for better pay. So it seems confusing at times, and yet it really isn't. But we're making excuses for our spending habits. Well, Ken, I mean, groceries and gas cost more. I mean, I get it. I really do get it. It's the same thing for me. I don't have a special discount grocery store that you don't have. But what I have is knowledge. What I have is a sense of discipline, and I have knowledge that says, okay, if my cost from utilities to groceries to gas at all rise, I got to look at how does that impact my monthly budget. So I'm going to have to make some changes. I don't just go, I can't do anything about it, and Joe Biden can't do anything about it. I'm going to vote for the other guy. I can't do that. I can control what I can control, and I can control my behaviors. There is no excuse for people making $200,000 a year to be living paycheck to paycheck. That is ludicrous to me. And it is wildly undisciplined. So, I was talking to one of our publicists earlier today because we were talking about, I'm going to be doing something on Fox News soon. And we were talking about inflation and we were talking about, well, how did it all get started? And it bears repeating. And I said, well, understand that when we were in the pandemic, let's just go back to 2020, and nobody knew what was going to happen. The global economy had been obviously shaken. Global leaders were uncertain. And so the United States government and the Fed, we basically started flushing cash into the system, right? So it was direct payments, it was PPP loans. Don't forget about the billions of dollars of loans that went out to businesses that then the federal government forgave. So I was saying, to my teammate, what do people do when they come into cash? What is the default behavior for somebody when they get a bunch of cash? It's not to go, I'm going to save this. Woohoo! Like the default human behavior when we get new cash, an influx of cash, is to spend it. So companies began to hire more. We saw an unbelievable hiring spree. We saw new jobs developed. Jobs that didn't exist before the pandemic now came. And so then we saw a job gap. Okay? All that to say, the reason I point this out is because your behavior is still the greatest tool you have to dealing with inflation. I'm not in any way relieving Congress and the president and our elected officials from doing things that are good for our economy. But what I am saying is they ain't got any control over this right now. They did all of that, and it created all of this. And it's not going to just turn overnight. And Jerome Powell's big grand strategy is to hurt the labor market, to drive unemployment up. It's buffoonery at best. So you are going to have to take control. And it's not doom and gloom. I'm actually quite positive that if you use Every Dollar, our world-class budgeting software, and you can get control of this. You are making more. And the person who's making $200,000 or $100,000 should not be living paycheck to paycheck. No matter who's in the White House or who's in control of Congress, you can control your personal economy. And it's time that we stood up, put our big boy pants on, our big girl pants on, and actually started living responsibly. And then you don't have to look to D.C. for a bunch of relief. So there's my 2 cents. I think it makes more sense than the Fed chair.